For 30 years, Johnny Carson was the voice America ended its day with. He made millions laugh, relaxed a nation, and became the trusted face of late-night television. But when he died, there was no funeral, no public memorial, no gathering of stars, no place for the world to say goodbye. His exit was quiet, private, sealed just the way he wanted. But silence doesn't erase history, because at the moment of his death, one name rose above all the tributes, one name he had spent his final decades refusing to speak. One person whose story, whether he liked it or not, was forever tied to his. Joan Rivers, the woman he discovered, the woman he lifted up, the woman he then erased. This is not a simple feud. It is the story of how loyalty becomes expectation, how gratitude becomes debt, how pride becomes punishment. It is the story of two people who loved what they created together, but could never say the words that might have saved them. A friendship born in the problem, spotlight. A betrayal forged in silence. And a goodbye that came too late. Because the most unforgettable person at Johnny Carson's funeral was the one who wasn't invited. Everyone thought they knew Johnny Carson. For decades, he sat behind a desk, smiled into the camera, and made America feel like everything was okay. He was smooth, quick, charming, and always in control. People saw him as the funny, relaxed host who could make a joke out of anything. Every night, millions of households ended their day with him. He tucked the country into bed. He felt familiar, like a friend who visited your living room. Many viewers believed they truly knew him, but the man they watched on screen and the man he was in private were almost like two different people. Off camera, Johnny was shy and distant. He was not the friendly host people imagined. When the cameras turned off, his energy would drop, and the humor that seemed so easy suddenly disappeared. He struggled with small talk and did not know how to relax around people. Those who worked with him said that he kept his real thoughts and feelings locked away. He had a way of smiling politely, ending a conversation quickly, and disappearing before anyone could get close. Even co-workers who sat beside him for years felt that they barely knew him at all. Dick Cavett, a fellow talk show host who understood how hard performing could be, once described Johnny as someone who simply did not know how to be social in a casual way. Cavett remembered that when people tried to talk to Johnny off stage, he would become stiff, quiet, and uncomfortable. The warm personality he showed the audience did not appear when the camera was not there. Cavett said it was almost like Johnny needed the camera to feel safe, as if it created a barrier between him and the world. Ed McMahon, who sat beside Johnny on The Tonight Show for 30 years, knew him better than almost anyone. Yet, even Ed admitted that their closeness existed mostly on stage. He once said that Johnny was comfortable talking to 20 million people, but extremely uncomfortable talking to 20 people face to face. That was the truth of Johnny Carson. He could talk to the world but struggled to talk to individuals. Ed respected him deeply, but he also understood that Johnny had walls that no one was allowed to climb. Writers and staff from the show had similar stories. They would work with him for years, but rarely shared real personal conversations with him. He did not like parties. He avoided large gatherings unless it was required. When he did go to events, he stayed for a short time and left early. At the studio, once the show ended, Johnny often went straight to his car and drove away. He did not stay to chat. He did not stay to bond. It was as if he had built his life so that no one could ever truly reach him. There were reasons for this. Johnny had grown up in a home where emotions were not shared openly. His mother was known to be cold and difficult to please. No matter how successful he became, he never felt he earned her approval. Some people believe this shaped the way he handled relationships later in life. If he could not win his own mother's affection, perhaps he decided it was easier not to try with anyone else. So, he created a safe distance. He allowed people to admire him, laugh with him, and cheer for him, but he did not allow them to know him. This distance protected him, but it also left him lonely. Fame made the distance even larger. When everyone wants something from you, trust becomes hard, and when you cannot trust, you keep people away. Johnny liked being admired. He liked being respected. But being understood, he never wanted that. Yet, for all his caution, there was one person he let in. One person he supported, encouraged, lifted up, and believed in more than almost anyone else in his long career. Someone he allowed closer than he allowed most. And the story of how that relationship began, grew, and then shattered, would become the most painful chapter of his life. Because the person he once championed would become the person he could never forgive. By the time she walked onto that stage, Joan Rivers had already failed many times. She had been told no so often that it had started to feel like her whole life. She was not born into fame or wealth. She worked for every small chance she ever got, and even those chances usually slipped away. In her early years, she lived in cheap apartments, and sometimes even slept in her car because she could not afford rent. She worked part-time jobs just to buy food, while performing comedy at night for almost no money. Some nights, the comedy clubs paid so little that the performers passed around a hat for tips. Often the hat came back nearly empty. She had already tried to get on The Tonight Show before, during Jack Parr's time as host. When she finally got one appearance, it did not go well. The show did not invite her back. In fact, she was quietly banned from returning. To be banned from the biggest late-night show in America was like having a door locked in your face forever. And for a young comedian trying to survive, that door was everything. Joan kept going anyway. She performed in small, smoky clubs in Greenwich Village, where the crowds were tough and the pay was low. She was loud, sarcastic, and sharp in her humor. But behind that was real pain from never being accepted. Other comedians she started out with, like Bill Cosby and Woody Allen, were rising quickly. Joan watched them move forward while she felt stuck in the same place, trying harder every year just to stay afloat. She was working, pushing, and hoping, but nothing changed. By 1965, she was 31 years old, and people in the industry told her that her time was over. At that time, 31 was considered too old for a new breakthrough. They said she had missed her chance. They said she should give up and find another career. It was painful to hear, especially after putting everything she had into comedy. But Joan refused to quit. She believed that if she could just get one real moment, one chance in front of the right audience, she could prove herself. That moment came in February 1965. The booking she received on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson was described as a mercy booking. It was arranged because her manager also represented Bill Cosby, who was already successful and popular. The idea was simple. As a favor, they would let Joan have one last try. She walked into the studio believing it might be her final chance to make it in comedy. If this failed, she knew there might not be another chance waiting after. When she stepped onto that stage, something changed. Her performance was sharp, quick, and honest in a way the audience wasn't expecting. She talked about her life, her frustrations, her insecurities, and she did it with humor that felt real. Her voice was not polished, her style was not soft, but the audience connected with her because she was speaking from truth. Every joke landed, every moment flowed naturally. She did not just make the audience laugh, she made them feel like she was one of them. When she finished her set, she sat down on the couch next to Johnny Carson. This moment was something every comedian dreamed of. Sitting on that couch meant acceptance, and what happened next changed her life. Johnny looked at her, right there on live television, and said, "You're going to be a star." It was simple, but the impact was enormous. Millions of viewers heard it. Hollywood heard it. Every club, every studio, every agent heard it. If Johnny Carson said you were going to be a star, then you were. Joan did not believe it at first. She even turned around, thinking he was talking to someone else. But he meant her. That one sentence lifted her from unknown to national recognition. It didn't happen slowly. It happened instantly. The phones started ringing, invitations appeared, audiences requested her. And most importantly, Johnny Carson continued to welcome her back. She became a frequent guest on the show. The audience loved her. Johnny laughed with her in a way he rarely laughed with anyone. She was bold, fast, and unpredictable. He was controlled, calm, and composed. Together, they created something special. This moment was more than a simple career break. It was not just a host supporting a young comedian. It was the beginning of a connection that would define both of their lives. The man who rarely let anyone close had opened a door for her. He lifted her onto the biggest stage in America. What began in that moment was more than mentorship. It was a coronation. Every empire has a successor. Everyone thought it would be her. After Joan Rivers's breakthrough night on The Tonight Show, her life changed quickly. She went from being a struggling comedian to someone audiences asked for by name. The producers invited her back again and again, because the time she appeared, the audience reaction was strong. People laughed with her, they remembered her jokes, and most importantly, they felt something when she spoke. Joan was not just funny, she was memorable. As her popularity grew, Carson continued to support her. He introduced her with warmth. He laughed openly at her jokes in a way that felt different from how he laughed with others. His laughter made her shine. On a show where everything was controlled and timed and shaped, their interactions felt alive. Joan spoke fast and honestly, often pushing the edge of what was normal for television at the time. She joked about family, about being a woman, about insecurities people usually hide. And Johnny played the role of the calm observer, who reacted just enough to bring out the humor. The rhythm between them worked beautifully. By the late 1960 seconds and into the 1970 seconds, Joan Rivers had become a regular guest. People at home began to see her as part of the Tonight Show world. They expected her appearances. When she walked on stage, it felt like a familiar friend had arrived. Her energy, jokes, and personality added a different flavor to the show, something sharp and lively that balanced Carson's cool composure. Over time, Joan did more than just make guest appearances. She filled in for Johnny when he was away. At first, she shared that responsibility with others, but as the years passed, she became the strongest and most reliable guest host. By 1983, she was officially named the permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. This was a major title. It meant that when Johnny was not there, Joan was the one chosen to take the chair. It was not just about performing, it meant trust. It meant approval. It meant she was next in line. The public saw the situation clearly. Carson was the king of late-night television, and Joan Rivers looked like the one who would inherit the throne. Viewers assumed that when Johnny eventually retired, Joan would take his place. Almost no one questioned this. It felt natural. It felt logical. She had been there for years. She was part of the show's identity. Magazines wrote about it. Newspapers commented on it. Fans spoke about it as if it were already decided. The Tonight Show was not just a television program, it was an institution. And Joan Rivers was seen as the heir. But the reality behind the scenes was not the same as the public story. On camera, they laughed together and looked comfortable. But off camera, their relationship was not close. They did not spend time together socially. They did not talk about personal problems or share private thoughts. They worked together professionally. They respected each other in a work setting. But there was no deeper friendship. Joan understood that Johnny kept his personal life locked away. Everyone knew that. Even people who had worked with him for decades did not get close to him. He had very few real friends, and most of those friendships were complicated or distant. Joan, she never felt that she knew him privately. She only knew the version of him that existed under the studio lights. She once described it very clearly. She said that their relationship existed completely on camera. The moment the red light on the camera turned off, the connection disappeared. She admired him deeply and felt gratitude toward him, but she did not feel that she was part of his private world. And Johnny saw her as someone he discovered and supported, but not as someone he would let close emotionally. Their relationship was built on performance, timing, and trust in front of an audience, not personal intimacy or shared life. Still, the public did not know this. To the world, they looked like a team, almost like family. So when things later went wrong, people assumed it must have been personal. But the truth is that it was exactly the lack of personal closeness that made the break so final. When there is no private foundation, there is no place to repair damage. Everything existed in the public arena, so when the relationship broke, it broke completely. Joan had worked for years to become worthy of The Tonight Show. She earned her position through effort, talent, and consistency. She took the job seriously. She respected the pressure of sitting in Carson's chair. When she hosted, she did not try to replace him. She tried to honor him. She understood that it was his stage, and he trusted her enough to let her represent him when he was away. But this connection, built on respect and admiration rather than real emotional closeness, was also fragile. They did not talk about fears, career worries, or decisions. They did not check in with each other privately. There was no shared understanding of how much the show meant to each of them individually. This is why, when new opportunities and new pressures came into Joan's life, she did not feel able to discuss them with Johnny. She did not feel she had the right. And when Johnny learned of her choices later on, he felt betrayed because he believed loyalty should have been unquestioned. The world thought the two of them were close, but they were not. And that misunderstanding would shape everything that came next. And that professional boundary is exactly why the break would shatter them both. A memo crossed her desk, and everything changed. For years, Joan Rivers believed she was secure in her place at The Tonight Show. She had been the permanent guest host, she had filled in countless times, and the audience had accepted her fully. It seemed clear to everyone watching from the outside that she was the natural successor. But what was obvious to the public was not at all the plan behind the scenes. In 1985, Johnny Carson was negotiating his contract with NBC. Everyone in the industry assumed it would be renewed. The show was still strong, and he was still the face of late-night TV. When the contract was finalized, it was for 2 more years. That made sense. Johnny was the center of the network's late-night lineup. He was the star. But then, the news came about Joan's contract. She was offered only 1 year, not 2, not matching his, not promising a future, just 1. At first, Joan tried to convince herself that the offer did not mean anything. Maybe it was just standard. Maybe it was just a technical thing. But the more she thought about it, the more it bothered her. She had been loyal to the show. She had always said no to other opportunities because she believed her time would come. She believed patience and loyalty would be rewarded. She believed she would be the one to take the desk when Johnny eventually retired. But a 1-year contract did not look like loyalty. It looked like hesitation. It looked like the network was unsure about her. The feeling sat uncomfortably in her chest. She tried to ignore it, but the doubt stayed. Then came the moment that confirmed her fears. Someone at NBC passed along a memo that listed the names of possible candidates to replace Johnny when he stepped down someday. It was an internal document. It was not meant for her to see, but she saw it. Her name was not on the list. The list included other comedians, some of whom had far less experience and far less connection to the Tonight Show audience. Yet her name was missing completely. After all the years she sat in the host chair when Johnny was away, after the trust viewers placed in her, after the success she helped maintain, she was not even considered. That was the moment everything shifted inside her. She realized that NBC did not see her as the future of the show. They saw her as a placeholder, a substitute, someone useful only when the real host needed a break. They never intended to let her take over. The dream she had believed in for so long was not real. It existed only in the public's imagination, not in the network's plan. The realization hit her deeply. Joan had always struggled with the fear of being unwanted. She had heard people in her past say she was too loud, too sharp, too much. She had spent her life proving she belonged. Now, she felt it slipping away again. Behind the jokes on stage was a woman who never forgot what rejection felt like. And now, rejection was happening in the biggest part of her life. She also knew that age was becoming a factor. Joan was in her early 52s, and the entertainment world could be cruel to women, especially women in comedy. She felt the pressure of time. She sensed that the network saw her age as a problem, even though her talent had never faded. The fear was not just losing a job, it was losing identity, losing future, losing the one thing she had built her life around. She felt alone in her worry. She could not go to Johnny. Their relationship did not work that way. They did not share personal fears with each other. She could not ask him if he saw her as the next host. She could not ask him why the network did not. The distance between them was always there, and now it felt heavier than ever. She tried to continue working normally. She still hosted. She still made people laugh. She still smiled and kept the show moving. But behind the scenes, she was starting to feel disconnected from the place that had once felt like home. The Tonight Show no longer felt like security. It felt like something that could disappear without warning. It was during this vulnerable moment when doubt was heavy, when the future seemed uncertain, that another network reached out. A new network, small but ambitious. One that wanted to make a bold entrance, one that needed a recognizable face. One that was willing to offer Joan something NBC hadn't, a guarantee that she would be the star, not the backup. They wanted her to host her own show, a show that would air at the same time as The Tonight Show, a show that would put her directly opposite Johnny, a show that would make her not just a performer, but a rival. And they were ready to offer more money and more control than she had ever been given in her entire career. At the exact moment her faith in NBC faltered, another network came calling. A brand new network, a staggering offer, and a choice that could not be undone. When Fox executives reached out to Joan Rivers, the company was still young and unproven. They were trying to become a fourth major network next to ABC, CBS, and NBC, but they needed something big to announce themselves. They needed someone recognizable, someone bold, someone who could draw national attention. They chose Joan. They invited her to a meeting and presented an offer that felt unreal. They wanted her to host her own late-night talk show, not just appear as a guest or fill-in. Her name would be in the title. She would be the star. The network would build the show around her. The offer came with a salary far larger than what she was earning at NBC. It also came with creative control. She would have freedom to shape the show's direction, instead of always fitting into Johnny's established format. It was everything she had worked toward for years. There was only one problem. The new show would air at the same time as The Tonight Show. It would go head-to-head with Carson. And in the late-night world, going against Carson was not competition. It was challenge. It was a statement. It said, "I am not your student anymore. I am equal to you." Joan did not see it that way at first. She saw an opportunity to secure her career. She had spent so long waiting for confirmation that she was valued at NBC. Instead, the contract offer and the excluded memo had shown her the opposite. Fox was offering her what NBC would not: certainty. She was being told directly, clearly, publicly, "You are the one we want." That was powerful, but the decision was not easy. Johnny Carson had changed her life. Without him, she may never have become known. She respected him deeply, and she was grateful. There was a bond there, even if it was mainly professional. She did not want to hurt him. She did not want to seem like she was turning her back on the very person who helped her rise. Loyalty was important to her, and she believed she had shown that loyalty for years. Her husband and manager, Edgar Rosenberg, looked at the situation differently. He was practical, strategic, and aware of how quickly opportunities could disappear. He understood that networks sometimes backed away at the last moment. A handshake was not enough. Only a finalized contract was protection. Edgar advised her strongly. Do not tell Johnny Carson or NBC about the Fox deal until the contract was signed. He believed that if she warned Johnny ahead of time, one phone call from him could end the deal before it was official. The fear was not unrealistic. Johnny had enormous power in the industry. If he wanted to stop something, he usually could. So Joan followed Edgar's advice. She did not tell Johnny. She did not tell NBC. She moved, quietly, preparing to sign the new contract. It was not because she wanted to deceive anyone. It was because she was afraid of losing the opportunity she had waited her whole life for. Yet, emotionally, it felt heavy. She was taking a step that would change everything, and she had to do it alone, without discussing it with the person who had been the center of her television career. Inside her, there was conflict. She felt torn between loyalty and survival. She had always believed loyalty would be returned someday, but now she knew that The Tonight Show was not going to offer her its future. She was being asked to stay in place, while others were considered to take the next step. Fox was offering her the chance to move forward. The choice was painful, but it was a choice between waiting forever or finally taking control. She tried to justify it to herself. She told herself that Johnny might understand if she explained later. She told herself that this was not betrayal. It was self-preservation. It was claiming her place before time pushed her out. She did not want to leave him behind. She simply did not want to disappear. As the contract moved closer to completion, Joan tried to prepare for the moment she would tell Johnny. She knew it would be hard, and she knew he might be hurt. But she believed she would have the chance to talk to him directly, privately, respectfully. But Joan never got that chance. Before the contract was officially announced, information about the deal leaked. Someone, somewhere, told the press, and the news spread fast. Suddenly, the headlines were everywhere. Joan Rivers leaving The Tonight Show to host her own late-night show on Fox. The announcement made it look like she had made a bold and public move against Johnny Carson himself. It did not look careful. It did not look respectful. It did not look like something done with hesitation or regret. It looked aggressive. It looked loud. It looked like a challenge. Johnny found out. From the news, not from Joan. Whether or not Joan tried to call him later became a matter of dispute, each side remembering it differently. But what mattered most was how it appeared and how it made him feel. To him, it looked like betrayal. And once the news broke, there was no going back. But the Fox deal was about to leak, and when it did, the world caught fire. There are two versions of what happened next. Both cannot be true. When the news of Joan Rivers' new show became public, everything moved quickly. Headlines spread the story before Joan ever had the chance to speak to Johnny personally. She knew how it would look. She knew how he would feel. She knew that no matter what reasons she had, hearing it from the press instead of from her directly would feel hurtful. So Joan said she tried to fix it. According to Joan, she picked up the phone and called Johnny as soon as possible. She said that when he answered, she told him about the Fox deal and tried to explain why she had accepted the job. She wanted to tell him that she still respected him, that she was grateful, that the decision was not about competing with him. But in her memory, Johnny did not let her speak. She said he hung up. She tried calling again. Again, he hung up. That was the end of their conversation. For Joan, that moment felt like the sudden collapse of a world she had believed in for 20 years. She felt erased in an instant. But Carson told a different story. In his memory, no such call ever happened. He said Joan never reached out, that she left without a word, that he found out the same way everyone else did through the news. To him, that was betrayal at its core. He had supported her publicly. He had lifted her up when so many others dismissed her. And now, she was leaving him to host a show in direct competition with his, without even telling him first. To him, that silence was not just a disappointment, it was a wound to his pride and sense of loyalty. The truth may exist somewhere between those two stories, or we may never know exactly what happened. People who knew them have different memories. The timing was tense, emotions were high. What matters is that each believed their own version. Joan believed she tried, Johnny believed she did not. And once two people hold different truths, reconciliation becomes almost impossible. For Joan, that moment was heavy with shock and sadness. She had always admired Johnny. She did not want to hurt him. She had spent years believing that their relationship was built on mutual respect, even if it was not a personal friendship. She did not think he would see her choice as betrayal. She believed he would understand her need to protect her future. In her mind, loyalty did not mean sacrificing her career. She thought loyalty meant honoring who helped you rise while still growing on your own. But to Johnny, loyalty meant something much stronger and much more rigid. In his world, loyalty was unbroken, unquestioned, alignment. He believed that she should have stayed with The Tonight Show until he chose to step down, and that leaving to start another late-night show, especially one scheduled against his, was a personal attack, no matter the reason behind it. To him, it was a challenge to his authority and his place. And Johnny Carson was not a man who forgave challenges easily. Those who were close to Johnny said that he felt deeply hurt. This was not just a business disagreement to him. He believed Joan owed him everything. That belief may not have been fair or balanced, but it was real to him. He saw himself as the one who discovered her, who gave her a platform, who gave her opportunity. In his eyes, she had chosen to break away from him. And that was something he could not accept. Joan, on the other hand, felt abandoned at the exact moment she needed understanding. She believed Johnny would at least listen. She believed the years she spent working alongside him meant something. She believed that even if he was upset, there would still be room to talk. When that did not happen, the feeling of hurt sat deep inside her. She had made the choice out of fear of being left behind. Now, the person she hoped would understand was the one turning away. Hollywood did not make things easier. As soon as the story came out, whispers began. Some people called Joan ungrateful. Some said Johnny overreacted. Some said the whole thing was inevitable. Everyone had an opinion, and almost no one had the facts. The narrative started to twist based on who people liked more. In Hollywood, stories spread faster than truth. People chose sides, and once sides are chosen, stories only become sharper and louder. Agents, managers, producers, and talk show hosts discussed it behind closed doors. Reporters printed rumors. Some people said that Joan had planned to replace Johnny. Others claimed Johnny was threatened by a successful woman. Some argued that Joan should have been the rightful successor. Others said she never had a chance. None of these stories were fully accurate, but they shaped the public understanding of the feud. And while the arguments continued, the emotional damage grew. Joan felt misunderstood. Johnny felt betrayed. Neither reached out again. There was no second attempt at conversation, no private meeting, no chance to clear the air. The silence between them became permanent, and then came the moment that changed Joan's life entirely. Johnny made a decision that was not spoken in public, but was felt everywhere in the industry. He banned her from The Tonight Show, not just for a few months, not just until things cooled down, indefinitely, permanently. He also made it known quietly, through the power of influence, that anyone who appeared on Joan's new show would not be welcome on his. And because Carson's show was the most important place for entertainers to be seen, this was not just a punishment. It was a warning to others. It was a message about power. People understood what it meant immediately. If you stood beside Joan, you risked your own career. This was not just a personal reaction. This was control. This was consequence. This was the beginning of the fall. And then Carson made a decision that changed her life forever. He didn't just close a door. He locked every door she might ever walk through. Once the news of Joan's new show on Fox became public, and the phone call dispute passed, Johnny Carson reacted in a way that shaped the rest of her career. He banned her from The Tonight Show. The ban was not temporary. It was not a pause. It was final. Joan, who had once been a regular part of the show and the person trusted to sit in his seat, was now completely shut out. From that moment on, she would never appear on the show again during Carson's entire remaining time as host. But the ban did not stop with her. It extended far beyond the studio. Carson's influence in the entertainment industry was enormous. The Tonight Show was the biggest late-night platform. It was where movies, TV shows, music careers, and comedians were launched. If you had a new project, you needed that couch. You needed Johnny's approval. Everyone knew it. So when people inside Hollywood learned that Joan was now hosting a new late-night show on Fox, they understood that joining her could come with a cost. Word spread quietly, silently, almost like a rule that didn't need to be spoken. If a guest agreed to appear on Joan Rivers' show, there was a risk they would no longer be welcome on The Tonight Show, and almost no one was willing to take that risk. Agents told their clients to stay away. Publicists advised their stars to avoid the new show. Even celebrities who liked Joan personally did not want to put their careers in danger. They did not want to lose access to Johnny's platform, which was still the most important in the industry. So Joan's new show struggled from the start. She had a stage, she had a set. She had the job she had worked for her whole life. But she did not have guests. She could not get the big names. Without big names, there was less excitement. Without excitement, the show's ratings could not rise. Joan was funny, quick, and strong on camera, but late-night TV relies on guests, and she couldn't get them. Behind the scenes, things were falling apart as well. Her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, had become a producer on the show. He worked closely with Fox executives, but the pressure of launching a major show was extremely heavy. Edgar wanted the show to succeed and believed he knew the best direction to take. The Fox executives also believed they had the right approach. This led to constant conflict. Meetings turned into arguments, decisions turned into fights. The energy around the show was tense and stressful. Joan was caught in the middle. She was the face of the show, but she was also working with her husband, who was emotional and deeply invested in its success. Edgar felt the weight of responsibility almost physically. He wanted to protect Joan. He wanted to prove he was capable. But the more stressed he became, the more difficult the work environment grew. As ratings struggled, Fox became impatient. They began to lose confidence in the show's long-term value. They wanted changes. Edgar resisted. Joan tried to keep peace between the network and her husband, but she could not fix the tension. The job that was supposed to secure her future was now threatening to destroy everything she cared about. Fox finally gave her a painful choice: remove Edgar from the show or risk losing everything. Joan refused. She believed loyalty mattered, especially to someone who had stood beside her for so many years. But Fox did not change their position. They fired both Joan and Edgar. Just months after the show launched, Joan was no longer part of it. She had lost The Tonight Show, lost the new show she risked everything for, and lost her professional foundation. Publicly, it looked like a professional failure, but privately, it was emotional devastation. Joan had always been strong in public life. She joked about pain. She covered hurt with humor. But this time, the pain was too deep to hide. The pressure of the collapse hit Edgar the hardest. He had believed he was helping build their future. Now he felt he had destroyed it. He struggled to handle the weight of guilt, stress, and loss. Joan tried to help him. She tried to reassure him, but the emotional strain had gone too far for too long. He could not carry it anymore. The criticism was harsh. The press did not treat the situation kindly. People whispered that she had made a mistake. They said she had lost everything because of that decision to leave The Tonight Show. But nobody outside their home knew how much Edgar was suffering. Nobody knew how much pain he carried. Nobody understood how broken he felt. Then came the moment no one could have foreseen, one that would haunt Joan for the rest of her life. Career destroyed, marriage collapsing. Then tragedy struck. After Joan and Edgar were removed from the Fox show, the emotional pressure on both of them worsened. Edgar had invested everything he had into Joan's success. He believed the show would prove that they were strong and independent, that they could build a path without relying on NBC or Johnny Carson. When the show failed, he felt personally responsible. He believed he had ruined Joan's career. He believed he had let her down. Even though Joan tried to tell him that they would rebuild and find another way, Edgar could not accept it. He saw the failure as something final. His mental health declined rapidly. He became withdrawn, quiet, and distant. Joan could feel him slipping away, but she did not know how to pull him back. She encouraged him to get help, to talk, to share what he was feeling, but he could not speak openly. He carried the pain alone. The pressure to be strong, to be the supporter, to be the protector, became too heavy. And then one day, Edgar took his own life. The news broke Joan's world completely. Losing her husband was not just losing a partner. It was losing the person who had walked with her through every chapter of her career. They had built everything together. They had fought together. They had believed together. And now, he was gone, leaving behind a silence that felt overwhelming. Joan was left with shock, guilt, confusion, and heartbreak all at once. She wondered if she had pushed too hard. She wondered if she should have handled the Fox situation differently. She wondered if she had missed signs she should have noticed. Grief comes with questions that never get answered. Joan was known for being loud, sharp, and strong. But inside, she was a person who felt deeply and held her pain close. Losing Edgar took away the part of her that believed she could handle anything. She felt broken in a way that was not visible from the outside. She still had to live. She still had to raise her daughter. She still had to work. But every step felt heavier. While she struggled to cope with loss, the professional world reacted in its own quiet, harsh way. Hollywood pulled away from her. People who had once called, once visited, once praised her work, now kept their distance. The entertainment industry often treats loss and failure like things that are contagious. When someone falls, others do not want to be near them, as if standing too close might pull them down too. Joan had always been surrounded by noise stages, lights, jokes, applause. Now there was quiet, a quiet she did not choose. The loneliness grew deeper. She would walk into rooms that used to feel warm, and now the air felt cold. People did not know what to say to her. Some avoided her because they felt awkward. Others stayed away because they did not want to take sides in the unspoken conflict between her and Carson. Joan felt abandoned by a world she had given her entire life to. In that silence, one thing stood out more painfully than anything else. Johnny Carson never called. Not once. Not a letter. Not a message. Not a simple, private note saying, "I'm sorry for your loss." Nothing. Carson had once been the most important voice in her career. He had told the world she would be a star. He had laughed with her. He had welcomed her onto his stage over and over. For 20 years, their names had been linked. Even if they had never been close friends, there had been trust, history, connection. In the moment when Joan most needed even a small sign of human compassion, he gave her nothing. For Joan, this was not about career anymore. This was about humanity. This was about whether she mattered as a person to the man who had once helped lift her into the world's view. When that call never came, the pain turned into something deeper and sharper. It became a scar, a wound that did not heal. Joan later said that this was the moment she realized the break between them was not just professional, it was personal. The ban from The Tonight Show was career punishment. The silence after Edgar's death was emotional punishment. It told her that she no longer existed in Johnny's world, not even as a memory worth 1 minute of compassion. She carried that hurt quietly. She kept working. She kept performing. She kept pushing forward because the only other option was to stop completely. And stopping was never in her nature. She rebuilt her life step by step. She worked in smaller venues. She did stand-up tours. She performed anywhere she was allowed. Slowly, audiences came back. Slowly, she started to find her voice again. But the wound remained. It stayed under the surface of everything she did. People often think that time heals pain. But for Joan, time did not erase what happened. It simply taught her how to live with it. She learned how to move while carrying a weight that never went away. She learned how to laugh again, but she never forgot the silence. Her humor became sharper, sometimes darker. It was still real, still clever, still strong. But now, there was an edge of survival in it. She was not just performing to entertain, she was performing to keep going. And while she was rebuilding her life, Johnny continued with his own. He remained the king of late-night television. He never spoke publicly about what happened between them. He never mentioned the conflict. He never explained his side. He kept silent. And that silence became part of his legacy. For years, their story stayed frozen in that moment. No apology came, no conversation happened, no bridge was mended. It was a wound held by two people who once shared a stage but could no longer share a single word. But the world did not know the story was far from over, because time has a way of forcing reckonings. No public funeral, no memorial, just silence. After Johnny Carson retired in 1992, he disappeared from the public eye, almost completely. He had spent 3 decades in front of America every night, and when he stepped away, he did not look back. He did not host guest appearances. He did not return for anniversary specials. He did not write a detailed memoir. He simply left. Those around him said he enjoyed a quiet life near the ocean, walking along the beach, reading, and spending time with his wife, Alexis. His world became small by choice. The man who once lived on stage now lived in privacy and quiet. Carson's health began to decline in his later years. He had been a heavy smoker for most of his life, even during his Tonight Show years when cigarettes were part of the culture. Eventually, it caught up with him. He developed emphysema, and his breathing became difficult. But even as his health worsened, he did not return to public view. He had always valued control, and that included controlling how the world remembered him. He did not want to be seen as sick or frail, so he stayed out of sight, surrounded only by a small circle of people he trusted. On the 23rd of January 2005, Johnny Carson died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 79. The news spread instantly. Television networks paused schedules to report on it. Newspapers ran large photographs of him smiling behind his Tonight Show desk. Statements poured in from presidents, comedians, actors, and talk show figures who credited him as the standard they tried to follow. Almost every tribute called him the king of late night. But what surprised many was what happened, or rather, what didn't happen after his death. There was no public funeral, no memorial service, no gathering for fans, co-workers, or friends to say goodbye. His body was quietly cremated, and the ashes were given to his wife. No location was announced. There was no place for flowers or letters. No ceremony to capture the public's love. The man who had spent so much time in the spotlight left the world in the same privacy he had guarded. Throughout his life, people mourned in their own ways. Fans left flowers on his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They visited Johnny Carson Park in Burbank, where the NBC studios once stood. Others watched old clips online, remembering the comfort and laughter he had given them. But mourning was scattered, silent, personal, just the way Johnny would have wanted. For Joan Rivers, the news brought something far more complicated than simple sadness. Her career was no longer destroyed. She had rebuilt herself. She had found success again through stage work, comedy tours, books, and television projects. But the wound between her and Johnny had never healed. And now, the chance to ever speak, ever explain, ever forgive was gone forever. In interviews following his death, Joan spoke honestly, without trying to hide the conflict inside her. She called him brilliant. She called him the best straight man in comedy. She said his timing and sensitivity on stage were unmatched. But she also acknowledged the pain he caused her. She admitted that his silence after Edgar's death still hurt. She said she wished they had spoken, even once, just to put something to rest. Her words were not bitter. They were tired. They were sad. They came from someone who survived something she never asked for. She did not want revenge. She wanted closure, and closure was something she would now never receive. She mourned him, but not the way the rest of the world did. The world mourned a performer. Joan mourned a chapter of her life that never found its ending. Yet the final chapter of their story hadn't happened in life. It would happen in memory. If he would not speak in life, she would speak to him in death. Years after Johnny Carson died, Joan Rivers still carried the weight of everything that had happened between them. The feud, the silence, the hurt, the loss, none of it had ever been resolved. There was no conversation, no explanation, no forgiveness. She kept living. Her life, performing, working, smiling, laughing, and making others laugh. But a part of her had never stopped wondering what would have happened if they had spoken one last time. During her reality show with her daughter Melissa, there came a moment when Joan decided to visit the site where Carson's ashes were kept. It was not a dramatic setup. There were no lights or audiences. It was simply a quiet visit to a place where a chapter of her life still lived, unfinished. Joan did not go there to accuse him. She did not go to express anger. She went because she needed to speak the words that had been locked in her chest for years. Standing there, at the place where Johnny Carson rested, she spoke softly. Her voice did not have the sharpness she used on stage. It did not have the rhythm of comedy. It had the sound of someone who had carried too much for too long. She said she hoped he was at peace. She said she wished things had ended differently. She said she wished they had talked. She said she wished they had understood each other. And she admitted, in her own way, that she had loved him, not romantically, but as someone who had shaped her life. There was no reply, just silence, the same silence that had existed between them for nearly 20 years. What makes the moment heartbreaking is what did not happen. There was no apology from Johnny. There was no apology from Joan, not because they did not want to apologize, but because the chance had simply passed. Time had run out. Pride had stayed too long. Hurt had stayed too deep. And once life ends, the opportunity to fix what was broken ends with it. The tragedy was not in the argument. Many people fall out. Many people disagree. The tragedy was in the silence that followed the years of distance that neither one was able to bridge. Joan had once believed that one day, when things had softened, when they were older, when the past felt smaller, they would talk. She believed there would be a moment where they could laugh together again about everything they had been through, but that moment never came. After visiting the ashes, Joan talked about how she felt. She didn't describe closure. She didn't describe relief. Instead, she described understanding. She understood that some wounds do not disappear. They simply become part of you. She had carried the story for so many years because the story never received its ending. She had learned to live with that, but she still wished it had been different. Her visit was not about forgiveness or blame. It was about releasing the words she had held inside. It was about acknowledging that once, long ago, two people had shared something meaningful, something that mattered, even if it did not last. The final reflection of their story is not about who was right or wrong. It is about how silence can do more damage than anger, how pride can prevent healing, how two people can love and respect each other and still let pain erase everything. Joan's visit to Johnny's resting place was not a reunion. It was a reminder that some of the most important conversations in our lives are the ones we never get to have. And this is where the main hook will land, the lesson about loyalty, power, and the ghost that outlived them both.